Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Compliance, where we connect with security and compliance experts. Today, we're going to be talking with Sunshine Arcilla about choosing the right compliance standard for your business. My name is Matt Cooper. I'm a senior manager for privacy risk and compliance at Vanta. Sunshine, would you like to do a brief introduction?
Yeah, and I'm Sunshine. I am a partner program manager at Vanta, but I'm also one of our in-house CPAs. Been with Vanta for about 9 months now, and before that, I spent some time at Deloitte, being an auditor and leading some of our engagements in SOC 2 world and SOX and other compliance programs as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about something that a lot of folks ask us about, which is how do I choose the right compliance standard for my business? So I was hoping just to get us started, you could give us the lay of the land and just help us understand what is a compliance standard and how does that apply to a business?
Yeah, and there's so many of them, right? But at a high level, compliance is, I like to think of it as a way for companies to basically showcase their security and build trust with their customers. And different compliance programs have different requirements. The way that I think about it too is some compliance programs are really built on rules and regulations and laws that you can't really get around, like for example GDPR, and if you're a big enough business, CPA. But there are some that companies can totally just opt into, like a SOC 2 or an ISO. It's not a requirement, but it's good to do it to showcase your security and to unblock deals and whatnot.
Okay, good. So I get that, you have to comply with the law, right? What about these voluntary standards? When does a company choose to do that? And what might they think about first?
Yeah. So as far as, when to do it, but before we get into that, I want to get into like why should you do it and why should you think about doing it, right? And I mentioned some of it already. First and foremost is that it's good for bottom line. It unblocks deals, it opens opportunities, retains customers because you are building that trust. But secondly, it's good for security in general. Getting compliant, in that process of getting compliant, right? You're basically building and strengthening your security foundation. And more importantly, I think it's it's one of the first things I touched on is it builds trust and protects trust for your business. So now let's get into like when should you do it, right? Some companies can really get away with this for longer than some, depending on where you are and what you do. But what tends to end up happening is, most companies will delay their compliance until it becomes a blocker for that like sale, for that, your investor is like asking you for that SOC 2 or that ISO. But really, you should be thinking about compliance, or rather like security in general, as you are building your company from the foundation.
Okay, great. That resonates with me. Okay, there are so many standards. Sometimes it just feels a little bit like alphabet soup. What are the questions we should be asking, or how should we prioritize those basically? What should we do first?
Yeah. So I would say there are like four main factors or questions that you should be asking yourselves. One, the easiest one is, what are your customers or prospects or investors asking for? That's going to be a really easy one to go with. And more likely than not, it's going to be one of those more widely accepted standards like a SOC 2 for the American market, or an ISO for more internationally recognized kind of version of SOC 2. The second question I would say is, who are your customers and where are they at? A lot of these compliance frameworks really depend on where your customers are, where do they reside. So, as I mentioned, SOC 2 is for the American market. We also have more specifically, for example, a CCPA for California residents. For you're looking at, something more globally, you're catering to people all over the world. ISO is a good one to start with. But there's also, as I mentioned, some of the things that you can't get away with, which is if you're catering to people that are in the EU, you're going to have to do GDPR at some point in your career. And then, of course, if you're catering to the US government, you might be looking at FedRAMP or NIST or one of those really more complicated types of compliance programs. So that's the second one is who are your customers? Where are they? The third one I would say is what type of data are you handling? Are you handling EPHI? Then HIPAA is something that you're going to want to do. Financial information, PCI is probably something that you're going to do, or is it just in general consumer data or customer data? So there's a lot of different niches in there as well. And then the last part I would say is, do you have any specific contractual obligations? For example, maybe you are a Microsoft supplier. You are going to be required by Microsoft to do something like a Microsoft SSPA. Or maybe you're trying to be listed on the AWS marketplace, then you're going to have to do something like an AWS Foundational Technical Review or FTR. So again, just to sum it all up, right? 4 questions you should ask yourselves are, what are my customers, prospects, or investors asking for? Who are those customers and where do they reside? What type of data am I handling? And then do I have any specific contractual obligations that I need to do?
Okay, good. All right. So if I understood it correctly, those foundational standards are most likely to be SOC 2 or ISO 27001.
Yep.
Those the uh universally applicable vertical agnostic standards. But then you talked about we should ask what kind of data are we processing, and that might affect where other compliance standards we're thinking about. How does that apply to something like CCPA or GDPR? What kind of data is that relevant to?
Yeah, so it's going to be relevant to personal data for customers. And the difference really there between the CCPA and GDPR is, I mean, there's more nuanced kind of requirements, but at a high level, it's that second piece that I talked about, which is where are your customers? Are they in California or are they in the EU? Depending on that, we might be talking about CCPA or GDPR, but at a high level, it's really around protecting the privacy of these consumers.
Good. Okay, perfect. Okay, that makes sense. So that's for personal information. What about these other niche standards that are relevant to certain data types? I'm specifically thinking of like HIPAA or PCI. Can you talk about when those might apply to a company?
Yeah, so HIPAA is when you are protecting something which is called EPHI, electronic personal health information. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So many acronyms, but basically, if you are a covered entity, which means you are handling EPHI or you are a like an associate of a company that is doing that, you're going to be required to adhere to HIPAA. And PCI is really around financial information. And so credit card information, anything tied to that is going to be PCI related.
Okay, good, good. Um, when we spoke earlier, you gave me kind of an analogy about security and compliance. I was wondering if you would share that again here. I thought that was a really good way to think about it.
And I will take credit for this, even though I shouldn't. I heard it from a professor a long, long time ago, and it just always stuck with me. So I'm going to attempt to say it. If it lands, it came from me. If it doesn't, it's from him. But basically, he talked about this relationship of security and compliance, and thinking about it as like a water dam system, right? If there's your dam and there's your water level, there's two things there. The water level you cannot control. It could go up or it could go down. You just can't control it. Similar to compliance, right? There are people out there, organizations out there that are setting these. It's out of our hands and it's out of the hands of these companies. What they can control is a dam, how tall they want it to be, how strong they want it to be. And so he, what he told us and what I'm going to tell, these viewers now is that take care of your dam, make it strong, make it tall, so that even if the water level rises unexpectedly, you're going to be set up for success, and your water is not going to overflow or flood anything. So that's kind of how I like to visualize the relationship of security and compliance. It's really, if you focus on security, you're going to be well set up for any compliance program that you want to do.
Awesome. Sunshine, thank you so much for your time today. I hope folks were able to learn something and got some insight into simplifying the process around choosing the right compliance standard for their business. You can learn more about other security and compliance topics on the resources section of our website at Vanta. Hope to see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you.